Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. I thought that once again, and I did not think that I was going to talk on this conversation again, but I did think all in all that I would talk on it at least one more time, unless I see another video that I think overall is going to be important enough to talk about on this subject. But once again, I'm going to be talking about the Shakur Stevenson issue. And Shakur Stevenson, of course, as of recent, for those of you that have not heard the news, Shakur Stevenson has called out the faction, or the cult, in my opinion, known as that of new media. And I've already stated this a multitude of times, and a certain amount of people probably do not agree with my terminology here, or they may find it offensive, but it just is what it is. It's just the truth. All new media and all the LDBC really is that they are a pro-black cult. And as of recent, overall, Shakur Stevenson finally realized what I've been saying for the past couple of years about those channels, at least the majority of them, which is that they are a pro-black cult. It just is what it is. And once again, a lot of people may not like the terminology, but why do I basically call them that? Why do I call the LDBC and the new media the Pro-Black Fighters League? The reason why I call them that is because they act exactly like a cult. And what does a cult do? Basically, if you do not go according to their ideologies, basically, if you do not agree with them, if you do not go according to their commands, they're going to gang up against you. They're going to try to terminate you. Or all in all, when it comes down to it, they're going to try to make you look very, very bad. And Dante's Boxing Nation, every single time that there is a black fighter that tries to give a non-black fighter some sort of credit, and this is what Shakur Stevenson recently did with a Mexican fighter by the name of Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, Dante's Boxing Nation always tries to allege the same thing. And basically what he stated was that, these black fighters, that they don't really realize the racial double standards in boxing, which makes no sense, as I've already stated a multitude of times, because if Shakur Stevenson did not realize at least that there were certain racial double standards against black fighters and that of boxing, he would have not alleged the things that he alleged about Bob Arum. He would have not alleged overall at certain times that certain boxing fans or certain boxing medias overall, quote unquote, hate black fighters. Now, sometimes, I think that that narrative can be a little bit overplayed, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to allege that Shakur Stevenson allegedly does not see any racial double standards, or that so many of these black fighters don't realize the double standards, you're going to have to go with the fighter that has not alleged overall certain racial issues in the sport of boxing. Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Gervonta Tank Davis, Terrence Bud Crawford, those are all fighters that have alleged some sort of racial double standard against black fighters in the sport of boxing. And yet they have still given credit to that of a Canelo Alvarez or that of a Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez or a Tyson Fury. So Dante's Boxing Nation's problem isn't necessarily that they allegedly, quote unquote, don't see the racial double standards. His real problem is that all in all, they're giving credit to a fighter like a Tyson Fury or a Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez or a Canelo Alvarez in the first place. Because Dante and new media's and the LDBC's main objective, at least usually with the majority of the channels, with people like Dante anyways, usually their main objective is to make sure that as little as Caucasoid or Latino or non-black fighters make the top 10 pound-for-pound list as possible. That's why every single time that there's a fighter that looks like a Canelo Alvarez or a Vasily Lomachenko or a Tyson Fury or someone of a sort, and now it's Naoya Inoue, they have a problem with them being ranked very, very high in the pound-for-pound list. Alexander Usyk as well. And don't get me wrong, once again, is there such a thing as maybe certain fighters or certain athletes being ranked above black athletes or black fighters because they maybe want to, change it up a little bit or make it seem overall like, it's somewhat more evened out? You can certainly allege that. I don't have an issue with that. But Dante always takes it a little bit too far. Because if you're trying to allege that Canelo Alvarez, that all he does is cherry pick throughout his career and all he does is take the weakest links, or if you're trying to allege with Vasily Lomachenko the same thing, if you're trying to allege with Alexander Usyk that he's only fought weak opponents, or Tyson Fury that he's allegedly this cheater and that's the only reason why he did it with Deontay Wilder, it wouldn't really necessarily be an issue, in my opinion, if Dante's Boxing Nation just talked about certain double standards or maybe how certain black fighters may have to deal with certain double standards in boxing, because I do think that that can be an issue. But when you take it overall to the emotional fanboy level overall, basically stating things that are just wildly out of pocket, or when you start stating things on the know that I believe are very, very, very counterproductive overall and counter truth, in my opinion, to that of the boxing scene. That's an overall I have to tune in. I have to say, no, that is not the truth. Because if you let these guys tell it, fighters like Canelo Alvarez, Tyson Fury, and Alexander Usyk, they apparently don't face anyone, and none of them deserve to be on the top 10 pound per pound list. And he is not the only channel that does this. So Dante's Boxing Nation, he is overall, in my opinion, not the most logical and objective dude. I've been saying this. I have nothing personal against any of these channels. I have nothing personal against any of these guys. I think that it's a great thing to come out with your own media. I think it's a great thing to come out with your own channel. But these guys just take it a lot of the times way too damn far. It just is what it is. But anyways, I thought that I would review this little video that I thought was very particularly interesting. This is going to be a video by this one boxing channel I don't think I've ever heard of before, by the name of Bushido Boxing. And basically, he's going to be stating his opinion on the Dante's Boxing Nation Shakur Stevenson subject, and he's going to be talking about who he believes is in the right or the wrong. And this is only a few-minute video, so it should be very interesting. But I'm going to be talking about Shakur Stevenson and what I think of the situation. But let's get into it.
What's going on, you guys? Not too much going on in the boxing community, but something that I did see is a big rift between Shakur Stevenson and Dante from Dante's Boxing Nation. Fighter versus media, right? New media versus the young fighter, right? Who's in the wrong in this situation? Dante came out with a hour-long video.
Well, if you're asking me overall about who's in the wrong in this situation, to me it's very clear. I really don't even think that it's that debatable. I understand that Dante, that his heart was allegedly in the right place, but a lot of the times, once again, Dante gets in that cult-like mentality, and that's what a lot of people will do. It's not even overall just people like Dante's Boxing Nation. It can be a certain amount of other demographics or a certain amount of other people as well. If you do not agree with their opinion, they will hate you. They will go against you. A fanboy overall can be very, very whimsical. They'll like you one day and they'll hate you the next, just depending overall on what you say. And I don't think that Dante's Boxing Nation necessarily hates Shakur Stevenson, but the fact that he was giving so much credit to Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, he did not like that. And basically with that, he had to allege that Shakur Stevenson, that he was allegedly ignorant to the double standards of boxing, because he does not want to have to deal with a fighter like Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez on the pound for pound list later on that of an ESPN. But what that tells me is that Dante's Boxing Nation, that, he cares a little bit too much what ESPN has to say about that of black fighters. If you're a person, I don't know, that believes that ESPN is truly overall that discriminatory, you should not really give that much of a shit of what they say. I mean, don't get me wrong. You may have to point out certain double standards and say, see, this is why ESPN is not reliable. But at the end of the day, Dante's Boxing Nation, all he is a person, in my view, that complains overall of why doesn't the media like us? Why overall don't they like certain black fighters? And once again, that's never going to work. I think that it's a great idea, once again, to come out with your own type of media, especially to cover certain fighters in a different way. That's the same reason why I came out with my channel. Because overall, this is a neutral, logical, and objective channel. Once again, I don't get on that pro-racial bullshit. I don't treat Latino or Caucasian or black fighters, Asian fighters, Arab fighters. I don't treat them any differently. Overall, I go off of what I see and what I truly believe. And unfortunately, with Dante, when it comes down, the majority of the time with him, at least from what I find, he gets a little bit too emotional. And in my view, I thought that he was a little bit out of pocket. I thought all in all that it was a little bit, and I even had one person say in my other video the other day when I posted this, they even thought that it was a despicable act. What I'll say is this: I definitely think that Dante was somewhat in the wrong here for claiming that Shakur Stevenson was completely ignorant on the racial double standards, and that basically, I mean, he was almost alleging to the point to where he almost was an Uncle Tom. That's basically almost what he was trying to say about Shakur Stevenson, and I also seen a lot of comments about this. And then Dante overall tried to say, oh, well, I'm just trying to help you. I'm just trying to, let you know the double standards. Well, Dante, I understand that. But at the end of the day, the real reason why you were so pissed off, or the real reason overall why you said the things about Shakur Stevenson that you did, was because you overall care a little bit too much about what an ESPN likes to say about black fighters. And you don't want someone like a Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez overall, above on the pound for pound list. Dante overall, the problem with him, in my view, is that he basically says, see, things are not going to change in ESPN unless we do something about it. If ESPN allegedly does not like black fighters, which once again, I think the narrative can be overplayed a little bit, but I understand his point. If a certain person overall does not like a certain demographic, they're never going to like them. We've all met people overall in our life to where we know that that person just for whatever reason had a problem with us, whether we did not connect well with them, or maybe overall they were a little bit of a jerk or whatever the hell it was. Maybe all in all, they were a little bit prissy, whatever the hell it may be. You do not beg for someone else's attention. You don't basically say, well, overall, if anything's ever going to change between us, we got to, start doing this and this. Some people are just not going to like you. And all in all, if you believe that ESPN is that discriminatory, then you should not really give a shit what the hell they have to say anyway. Your main point should be, well, this is why we cannot trust ESPN. So from now on, we need to come out with our own media, and we need to overall stop taking their pound for pound list seriously. But the problem is with Dante is that he's just not an objective and logical thinker. So even if he took that route, I highly doubt that he would ever come out with a great pound for pound list of actual substance anyway. Because some of these guys, for example, they'll have a fighter like a Jerome Boutsenis on the top 10 pound for pound list. And a certain amount of people have told me how special they believe he is. And I agree, he is special, but you can never have a fighter, in my opinion, that has never won a belt in their career on a top 10 pound for pound list. It's just not possible. I mean, that's like me putting LaMelo Ball overall in the top 10 NBA players right now just because of his future potential. I just can't do it.
You ever seen an hour-long video from Dante since he went over there to Thailand, right? We haven't seen him put anything like that out in a long time. Really elaborate. He really broke everything down. And really, Shakur Stevenson, check out what Shakur Stevenson had to say, right? Start.
Asked me like I'm not for my people. Dude really threw me under the bus on his YouTube channel because he got beef with Top Rank or whatever white people or however it go, you got beef with them. Don't throw me under the bus in the process, bro, because that's contradicting your whole statement. You literally throwing another young black successful athlete under the bus because of the fact that you got beef with them. They put these pound for pound lists together and say this or do whatever. That's not me, bro. It's not me. I feel how I feel about certain situations at the end of the day.
Once again, let me applaud Mr. Shakur Stevenson because what he showed me, at least at the current moment in time, my interpretation was he doesn't really give a shit overall what ESPN has to say about him. That he's going to do whatever he needs to do as long as no one is going to interfere with him getting big fights. And now that he ended up getting the Oscar Valdez fight, he probably is going to have a lot more options. So let me give Shakur Stevenson a round of applause because a lot of the times, not even just with certain athletes, but people in general, they give way too much of a shit about what people or other people think of them. And you're never overall going to get their respect overall by begging for their attention or begging, them to treat you in a more positive way. Sometimes it ain't going to happen. All right, it just is what it is. But what I will say about ESPN is this, and what I and I've kind of argued this, their pound for pound recently at the current moment in time, even though I would disagree with certain spots, you could argue that their list really is not even that bad of a list in my view, because there are certain fighters on the list. Now, not having Devin Haney on the list and having Artur Beterbiev on there, would I maybe dispute that? Maybe, but you could argue that those fighters are in a very, very similar class anyway. So it's not like it's completely unrealistic. It's not like, once again, it's not like Champ Side's list where I see a Jerome Boutsenis on there who's never even won a belt. So if something like that happened, then I would say, okay, something here is rotten. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I think that ESPN somewhat can be racially motivated? Yes. But at the end of the day, once again, Dante is really no better. In fact, he may even be worse because Dante's Boxing Nation, every time there's an elite Caucasoid or Latino fighter or some sort of fighter that is not a black American fighter that seems to debatably be the best of their division, this dude is always trying to tear this guy down, whether it's a Tyson Fury, whether it's a Vasily Lomachenko, whether it's a Canelo Alvarez, whether it's an Alexander Usyk. This man is always trying to tear those fighters down. Now, some people may say, well, that's not true because he gives credit to Josh Taylor, he gives credit to David Benavidez, he gives credit overall to that of a couple of other fighters, a Josh Taylor. Those are the main fighters that you notice. The reason why they give so much credit to Josh Taylor, and I've already explained this so many times, is because Josh Taylor is around the Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence weight class. So if Josh Taylor ends up losing to that of a Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr., which is pretty much, in my opinion, confirmed that he would, because I don't think that he's on those guys' level, they could basically state, wow, Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr., they just defeated a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. Now, Josh Taylor, in his last fight, probably should have lost against a random Caucasoid, I believe, British fighter by the name of Jack Catterall, but they still have him on their top 10 pound-for-pound list. But they don't have Tyson Fury, who is the best heavyweight of the past 10 to 15 years, at least of the past 10 years, 10 plus years when it comes down to it. They don't have him on there. They don't have Alexander Usyk on there, who completely unified a somewhat decently talented cruiserweight division, then beat Anthony Joshua, one of the best heavyweights in the world, where he was outweighed by 20 pounds. They also don't like to have Canelo Alvarez on there, who is a 4-weight division champion. And they also don't like to have Vasily Lomachenko on there. And listen, Vasily Lomachenko, I would not have on my pound-for-pound list right now either, just because he's not a champion at the current time. But once again, is it a coincidence that any Caucasoid or any Latino fighter usually, or any fighter that is not a Black American fighter that seems to be the best of their division, that they try to constantly tear them down? No, it's not a coincidence whatsoever. So like I said, I know what these channels are truly about. I get some of these guys, or these gals sometimes that come on my channel and they say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Dante's just sticking up for black fighters. Well, it's cool to stick up for black fighters. No problem with that. But he's also a very highly emotional, very irrational dude. It just is what it is. And oftentimes, in my opinion, he spreads a lot of false narratives because he wants the top 10 pound-for-pound list overall to basically be his way. But anyway. And listen, I understand once again, if you feel that a certain racial demographic, or if you believe that a certain media is portraying your demographic in a negative light, I can understand maybe some, animosity there. Listen, I get it. But once that goes into your rankings, once that goes into overall the way that you break things down, that means that your mind is infected, and that means that you cannot be counted as a logical or objective commentator. For example, if we were to talk about, let's say Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and overall we were to talk about, let's say that you were a Caucasian and, you had a racial issue and, you were trying to argue that Josh Allen was the better quarterback of the two overall, but you really don't have a lot of facts on your side. That's really overall the main issue that I usually see with his videos. Dante, with the points that he usually tries to make, they really almost make no sense whatsoever, or he doesn't hold the same standards to almost a lot of the same fighters out there. He'll allegedly criticize Canelo Alvarez, for apparently not facing a lot of the elite top contenders, even though he's facing champion after champion after champion, and champions that actually have some sort of pedigree. But then Gervonta Tank Davis, for example, will face a Rolly Romero, someone who's never been a legitimate champion in his career, and someone who has the boxing skills lesser than a prime Ricardo Mayorga. And apparently that is a big fight. That is a great fight. He even went as far to say that if Canelo and Gervonta Tank Davis were in the same weight class, that Canelo would be much easier for Gervonta than what Rolly Romero would be. So it's no offense against Dante. Listen, I get it. Great to cover black fighters in a better light, but you cannot be trusted with your logical and objective analysis. I mean, it's just a bunch of buffoonery going on here. But anyway.
I'm just saying, man.
All right, let me just start by saying this. Exposing double standards, it has nothing to do with beef. There's no beef with ESPN. Everything that I said about ESPN was to defend you and people that look like you.
Now, after hearing some of the things that...
The problem with Dante, once again, is that he gives too much of a shit about what ESPN actually says about black fighters. If you think that ESPN or Fox Sports News, if you think all in all that, they basically say all these things, you should not be begging overall or basically saying overall, well, just acknowledge our fighters and this guy should not be on the pound-for-pound list. If you believe that ESPN has not been logical for the past, how many goddamn years, then don't expect them ever to be. All right, because most people, they don't change that whole much. It just is what it is. But anyway.
Shakur Stevenson had to say, he's a young guy, man. He's a young fighter, young guy in the game. He's got to learn how to not take everything personal. he's got to learn how to not take everything seriously, right? Sometimes
he has to learn not to take everything seriously. Well, apparently, the reason why you got on Shakur Stevenson's ass, or the reason why a certain amount of people were telling Shakur Stevenson this in the first place, was apparently because you guys were taking shit too seriously. Because you were afraid that ESPN was going to replace Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez a couple years later on down the line, overall, against Shakur Stevenson. So you want to say that you don't take things too seriously. It's actually you guys that are taking things too seriously because you give too much of a fuck about what ESPN actually thinks of black fighters. You should not care. Now, don't get me wrong. It is important in my view to expose certain double standards. And if you believe that that's going on, then do that to the best of your ability. I do the same thing. But at the end of the day, when I'm reviewing these channels, I don't ever bitch or moan and say, these guys overall, they really need to change their ways. When they're not going to change their ways. People don't go from over emotional or having a racial issue one day, especially when they're set in their ways, when they're in their 30s and 40s, 50s, 60s, to all of a sudden just, having a completely different perspective. Most people in the first place usually don't even have that great of a deal to put themselves in another person's shoes anyway. So I don't expect Dante's Boxing Nation to change. I don't expect ESPN to change. But the reason why I do videos about this overall is to put my perspective out there and try to put the logical and objective truth the best way that I can. But once again, I find it very interesting that this guy basically says that, well, he's going to have to take things not as seriously. What was Shakur Stevenson not supposed to take seriously? When Dante's Boxing Nation said that he was trying to appease the Caucasoids and he was trying to appease overall the Latino fan bases over his own people, that he was trying to appease them. That's basically almost alleging that he is an Uncle Tom. So Shakur Stevenson has the right to react to whatever the hell that he wants to. Now, there are certain times all in all to where we do have to watch out how sensitive we are, because not everything overall is always meant for an attack. But basically, Dante's Boxing Nation, even though I don't know if he 100% meant to badmouth Shakur Stevenson, in my view, he went a little bit too far. But it is what it is.
I'm trying to see where things probably was.
Because I really don't, I don't know how the hell you didn't see this coming, especially if you're a big boxing channel like Dante. You were basically alleging about Shakur Stevenson that, he was trying to appease his Latino and his Caucasoid fan base. And that was the main reason why he was giving credit to Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez and Tyson Fury. You were basically insulting his intelligence. You were basically insulting overall his individuality. And you were insulting his courageousness. You were basically saying that, all in all, that he was being a slave to the media. That's what you were saying about Shakur Stevenson. So Shakur Stevenson don't just have to sit back and take your shit. Because basically what you were alleging about Shakur Stevenson was that, all in all, that he was just jumping on top of the bandwagon and that his opinions were not really for himself. That the only reason why he was saying it was because, all in all, old media apparently said that, or because the Caucasians or the Latino fans wanted him to think that way. And Shakur Stevenson basically came back and said, no, fuck you, when it comes down to it. F all that shit. I overall see skills, and overall I give credit to anyone that I want to. And overall, I applaud Shakur Stevenson for that. You know why that is? Because that means in my book that he's an individual thinker. Because so many people, they get pressured by some of these cults, or they get pressured overall by some of these fan bases, and they back down. But I'm very proud, and I'm very glad that Shakur Stevenson, overall, you have to appreciate that as an individual, that he's an individual thinker. Because most people are not individual thinkers. Most people, all in all, are afraid to put their actual opinions out there. What that shows me about Shakur Stevenson is that he really don't give a shit what you think. It really doesn't care. It really doesn't matter what demographic you are. And that's a very great thing, because oftentimes, no matter what demographic you are, the demographic that'll oftentimes put the most chains on you is your own.
Corey probably felt that there was some type of issue, probably along the lines to where Dante felt like, how you gonna say Tyson Fury is better than Muhammad Ali and all this when Top Rank and these guys barely got you on the path.
Well, as Shakur Stevenson said, he did not really say that Tyson Fury was better than Muhammad Ali. All he was saying is that he doesn't really see a way how Muhammad Ali could beat that of Tyson Fury. Now, some people overall may say, well, what the hell is the difference? The difference is that he didn't say that Tyson Fury was ever more skilled than Muhammad Ali. But he said the reason overall, and I thought that it was a completely rational thought, Because if you put a Tyson Fury, a fighter that is that size with his physical abilities and also his boxing intelligence, and he is an extraordinarily intelligent fighter and man, in my opinion, Mr. Tyson Fury is, when it comes down to it, anyone is going to have a tough time with him. Muhammad Ali in his prime is about 220 pounds, 6'3", 78-inch reach. If Tyson Fury and Muhammad Ali got in the boxing ring, it would potentially be a hell of a time for Muhammad Ali. You're talking about a guy that, the biggest guy that he fought was a George Foreman, who of course was a hell of a puncher and very big size. George Foreman was about 250, 260 pounds, 6'4". Tyson Fury is 6'9", with an 85-inch reach and overall can weigh almost to 300 pounds. So Tyson Fury is going to be a hell of a time for any heavyweight in history, not only because of his size, but because he's also an all-time great fighter.
Pound list, basically, right? They barely got you on the pound list, and this guy's.
But I'm liking overall what this guy basically stated here, because what that shows me is that he has the same mentality as a Dante's Boxing Nation. Because basically what Dante was trying to say is, why the hell are you giving these fighters credit when they're not giving you credit? And that's understandable, but if you're a logical and objective thinker, you really don't give a shit whether overall people hate you or not. This is why I always say, when I talk about athletes, I really overall don't give a shit what their personality is like. I judge you overall off of what you can do within your profession. I really don't give a shit what you do outside the scenes. So that mentality of why the hell are you giving these guys credit when they don't give you credit? You know why that is? Because what their opinion is of Shakur Stevenson, he does not take into account. He does not give a shit. And that overall means that he's in a very good point. Because overall, you have to be that point to be an objective and logical thinker. Because if you think overall, well, I'm not going to give these guys credit if they're not giving our fighters credit, that's cool. But then just don't call yourself a logical and objective thinker. Because when you're a logical and objective thinker, you really don't give a shit about what the majority of people say about you. Or overall really, say, because you realize that most people, and some people may not agree with me on this, but it is what it is. That most people out there, they're not super rational, they're not super logical or objective, and they're not always the sharpest tools in the shed. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Like me, Dante Boxing Nation, who be out here standing on the front lines for guys like you. That's basically what I got from it. And Dante Boxing Nation, if you've been around, he's one of the originals, one of the pioneers of this shit, right? So if you've been in the boxing community for any length of time, you know who Dante is. And yeah, you know what type of things he does over there on his platform. He stands strong for the racial divide and the racial bias in the boxing community. And he always been doing that in this.
The racial divide. I think Dante's Boxing Nation actually creates a lot more racial divide than what he actually does solve. What has Dante's Boxing Nation really solved within his time of having his channel? And don't get me wrong, once again, I think it's a great thing to cover black fighters in a better light, but what the hell do you really solve? All you basically do is make excuses for your favorite fighters. You're no better overall than an over-emotional fanboy, because really, to be quite honest with you, that's really all you are. Don't get me wrong, it's a very great thing to have your own platform, but he's not a logical, he's not an objective thinker by any means. No stretch of the imagination.
Something that he always likely will do. And maybe Shakur Stevenson, something went over his head. Maybe he took something the wrong way that the OG said. But nonetheless.
No, he didn't take anything the wrong way. He didn't take anything the wrong way. He heard Dante's Boxing Nation and a certain amount of other people, those channels, basically say that Shakur Stevenson was ignorant to some of the racial double standards, and that was the reason why he was coming out with that opinion, because he was allegedly getting pressured. Basically, what was he saying about Shakur Stevenson? Not only that he was allegedly an Uncle Tom, but that he was afraid to actually put his actual opinion out there overall, and that he was not an individual thinker. So not only was he insulting overall his courageousness, he was always also insulting his intelligence. So no, Shakur Stevenson didn't misunderstand shit. He understood it perfectly. Dante said overall what he said, and if that's your opinion, that's your opinion. But then don't get bitchy with it when Shakur Stevenson retorts. Because once again, in my view, it was Dante who was in the wrong here.
Dante, hopefully these guys squash this beef. Hopefully, there's water under the bridge now. But these fighters, man, they got to learn how to not to take everything personal when the media guys or guys with an opinion says something about them. It's their job to go out there and...
Well, listen, Shakur Stevenson, all in all, does not have to take everything seriously. And to be quite honest with you, it's a good thing if you don't take what the majority of people say about you seriously. Not saying all in all that you should not take anything into account, but at the end of the day, the majority of people, especially when you're a high grade athlete, they're not gonna like you all in all because you have a great hold of power. All in all, neither they'll be jealous or they're fanboys and they don't want you above one of their fighters. So I think it's a good thing all in all to realize that you should not really care overall what they think. But you know what? I thought that Shakur Stevenson's retort, I thought that it was appropriate. Because once again, what Dante was basically alleging, he was insulting his intelligence, he was insulting his individuality, he was also insulting his courageousness. So no, fuck all that. Shakur, they basically say, oh, well, maybe he's misunderstanding something. No, basically all Shakur Stevenson said was that, all in all, he does not give a shit what ESPN does. They can do whatever they do. That is not going to stop him from giving credit to a fighter that he believes is a decently great fighter, and that's what a logical and objective thinker does. Don't get me wrong. Once again, sometimes it is important overall to give credit where credit is due. Excuse me, I didn't mean it like that. Sometimes it is important to, give back the same energy that you're receiving. That's what I meant to say. Brain fart there. But anyways, when it comes down to it, once again, if you're a logical and objective thinker, you have to think on the level of no matter what their personality is or no matter what their personal thoughts are, we have to basically see if what they're doing or what they're saying has some sort of substance. So it is what it is. Anyway.
These critics wrong, right? Sometimes even the guy that may be critiquing you could also be a fan. So you got to kind of be careful, right? Because I'm sure Dante, amongst many of us, like a lot of us, are fans of Shakur Stevenson. But then there's a little rift between the fighters and the media.
You really should not give a shit. I'm not saying that you shouldn't give a shit, but you should not care as much about what certain fans think of you. And the reason why that is because fans can be so whimsical. Because they basically almost love you like a drug when it comes down to it. They get basically high off of you doing great things. But let me tell you something, when you start losing fights, all of a sudden a lot of those fans, they're not going to be the same. Or if you say something that they disagree with, all of a sudden they may not like you. Like, who cares? It just is what it is. One thing, once again, I applaud Shakur Stevenson because basically what he showed me is that he does not have the chains on himself like what a certain amount of other athletes or fighters would have. Like that of a Deontay Wilder, who fell into that Pro Black Fighters League bullshit with that of Dante's Boxing Nation and Boxing Ego. But anyway.
And it seemed like the fighters have more of a problem with the guys with more of an independent platform. Guys who doing their own thing. Guys on YouTube like your boy Bushido, Dante, Blue Blood, all the other guys out there. They seem to have a problem. And the fighters got to learn how to not to take everything personal, because at the end of the day,
no, fuck all that. It was personal, and I have no problem with Shakur Stevenson, taking it personal because basically what Dante was trying to allege, all because he gave credit to a Mexican fighter, he basically tried to allege that he was not an individual thinker. No, fuck all that. Shakur Stevenson had the right to react however he wanted to react.
A lot of us are fans of the same guys, right? We all,
at least overall with the way that he did, I thought that was the best way to come back. Of course, not everything is going to be the same reaction when it comes down to it. Of course, he didn't need to go to Dante or anything or fight him up like that. That's not what I'm saying. So let's not take it that far just in case anyone does. But what I am saying is that Shakur Stevenson at least had the right to react and say something to defend himself.
Fans of these dudes, sometimes we may say things that may offend them, right? Sometimes some fighters are sensitive guys, man. And Shakur Stevenson is going to have to learn how to...
Shakur Stevenson isn't sensitive. All he did was defend his point of view. All he did overall was tell Dante that, listen, you insulted my intelligence. You basically said that the reason overall why I said these things was because I was afraid of what the Caucasian and what the Latino fan base said, and that was not the case. So no problem overall about what Shakur Stevenson said whatsoever. A lot of people overall, they always say that certain people are sensitive when they react in a certain way, when people say offensive or derogatory things. Do you expect that certain people overall to just take it laying down when it comes down to it? Listen, sometimes people are going to react, especially if they think all in all that they need to someone overall, put a different narrative out there or maybe protect their image.
Roll with the punches, just like how he rolled with him when he was inside that ring. Like, subscribe.
But anyways, that's really about it for today. I just thought that was very particularly interesting. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and we will see what goes on with the Shakur Stevenson case. But I just thought that was very particularly interesting. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.